driving by, and they may never see the rest of the city because they're going straight down the hill over 378, and as far as they know, we have a crappy, intersection and a nice bridge. So why not put our best foot forward and say, hey, we have more to offer than just this? And that's my goal as far as a business owner, is to see that happen in the neighborhood. And I'm invested there. I grew up in the area, and so for me, it's like home again. So I just encourage you guys to make the decision. In my opinion, the parking lane is the right decision for the neighborhood, for the businesses, and for the community of Bethlehem. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Talent.
Stephen Antalix, 737 Ridge. In relation to the funeral processions, I come from a family named Antalix, Untelich in Slovenia, and the first Untelich Antalix set their foot in Bethlehem in 1911. Stephen Charles, my father, Teresa Francis, my mother, William Charles, my brother, Margaret Francis, my sister, and Elizabeth, my sister, all were buried from Bethlehem and escorted by the police and no charge. So I felt that was a privilege because of the dedication to the city. Now, I am the last of that bunch. I was the firstborn and the last now. So when I expire, I'm 82 and a half, so how many more years do I have? I don't know. But when that time comes, will I be deprived of the privilege my family had of being escorted by the police at no charge? Now, if you decide to pass this funeral procession fee, can you exempt me from my history of that charge? And say, I will have a free funeral procession because of the longevity of our family in the city of Bethlehem going to 1911. Now, if you can't do that, then you're going to require me to redo my will and say in my will to be guaranteed that I have a procession followed by police escort, as my family has enjoyed over the last almost century, to say, take out of my will the fee of the procession, depriving my children of that fee. So, as you're gathering right now, we're getting into a theater that's absurd. And we're dealing in absurdities here. So act accordingly and be wise.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Mr. Grubb?
Dana Grubb, 2420 Henderson Place. As I've attended nearly all of the budget meetings, I've thought on a number of occasions of the prognosticators who predict championships for teams in professional sports well before a single game is ever played. They offer their expertise and their guesses as how the season will play out, and most of them are wrong. City budgets are much the same kind of situation, and city officials haven't been guessing too well for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm going to take a guess here, and outside of Dennis tonight, I'm probably the next most experienced individual in local government. I understand the budgeting game probably just as well as Dennis, and it's usually accomplished by adjusting revenues to support expenditures. The 2012 budget you are considering is no different tonight. Real estate taxes, current and prior, are up $1.2 million in this budget. Earned income taxes are up $250,000. D-transfer taxes are up $110,000. Mercantile tax up $75,000. The suburban stakeholders agreement is back in the budget for the third time at $303,000 plus. The Bethlehem Parking Authority is in for $300,000, and they haven't had 2 nickels to rub together for the last 2 years. I'm wondering if it will be the economy that gets blamed once again if these predictions aren't met. On top of this, I've become privy to a December 16th memo from the city controller in which we learned that the city's 2011 costs for Music Fest are nearly $72,000 above the agreed upon reimbursement amount, which was $110,000 plus. The mayor has approved payment of this amount in 9 monthly payments that began in November, and it won't be paid back to the taxpayers until July of 2012, and he's waived any interest accrued for past due payments. My question is, where's that kind of break for the property taxpayers in Bethlehem? All they're getting in this year's budget is a fire station closed, 1 of 5 in the city, 7 police officers cut, 2 inspectors cut, poorly maintained parks, and basic city services such as snow removal that are nowhere near the quality that a lifetime city resident would remember. $150 funeral escort fees and continuation of the so-called dedicated tax. And right, wrong, or indifferent, that 2011 dedicated tax sat in a city account and was never spent. In retrospect, it would have been better to leave it in the pockets of the people who actually knew what to do with it, the taxpayers. Most residents show up at these meetings because they've taken issue with something the administration has done and hope the council will seek to redress their concerns. Far too often they're met with blank looks, they're stymied by political relationships, or are subjected to personal political agendas. But you are the elected officials that residents come to in the hope that you will do your best to represent their best interests, not special interests or personal interests. And to make matters worse, only one of you has the kind of real-world experience on budgets, the size of which dwarf this city's budget, and that person's advice is usually ignored. Finally, I thought it might be fun to compare Bethlehem to another city, just to put this budget into perspective. That city's population is 59,322. Unlike Bethlehem, it suffers from high unemployment, according to the research that I've done on the internet. Unlike Bethlehem, it does not have a casino. Unlike Bethlehem, it has not raised real estate taxes in 2 years. Like Bethlehem, it is raising sewer and water rates. Unlike Bethlehem, it has budgeted, listen to this, $2.2 million out of its $46 million 2012 budget to be added to its $7.57 million reserve. It's another historic community, and it's not Shangri-La. It's Lancaster, Pennsylvania. What a difference responsible fiscal management can make. Thank you.
Thank you, gentleman over there, and then Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. My name is George Santana. I'm the owner of 419 Wyandotte Street and 421. I'm here representing myself, but also my family, Roberto Santana, who owns the tax business at 419, and also owns with my mother, Orphelina Santana, the 433 and 431. They used to own 425 as well. They sold that to the current owners now who opened College Carnage. I'm here to really point out that there has been a lot of conversation here about the impact on jobs potentially that this removal of the turning lane will actually have. But I could actually speak very specifically about the fact that my mother had a small business, a thriving flower shop that was always her dream. 20 years in Bethlehem, a lifelong resident, or since she moved from the Dominican Republic, 20-year resident of Southside Bethlehem. Always wanted to open a flower shop. She spent 15 years in Muhlenberg Hospital, always paid her dues, raised 3 great kids. I'm one of them, who did pretty well and are doing pretty well. And all she really wanted to do was kind of have an early retirement so she could work harder and try to be a small businesswoman in Southside. She always wanted to open a flower shop. So she did. That was when the parking was actually still in place. While the parking was there, she was able to purchase all of her supplies from local suppliers. She was able to hire 4 people to work with her, helping her transport flowers that she was selling around the city. And somehow, in the second year of her operating her business, this decision came about to remove the parking for McDonald's. That action, literally, almost overnight, wiped her out. Wiped that business out. Within a month of the parking being gone, she had to shut down that business. So my mother's dream was squandered. She tried for another 2 years to make that business work out of our house, really, and it just never really worked out. Now, small businesses fail. You know, a lot of people in this room probably have had small businesses, and entrepreneurs know that you always have 3 or 4 failures before you have a success. So maybe she would have failed anyway. But the real point of me talking about this is that Bethlehem has a chance to really send a statement to future entrepreneurs, to future small businesses, to people who really want to try to build a local economy with buying from local suppliers and servicing local needs. They have a chance to send that message by actually making that block, the 400 block of Wyandotte, a friendlier, a safer, pedestrian-friendly block that is better integrated into a thriving downtown, that is more attractive to people that are walking around on the first Friday. I love the fact that there's a gallery that it has been operating out of Cali. And I know that the carpet itself, the carpet gallery has actually been open for First Fridays for a while. I don't believe that they've had the kind of traffic that they could have had if people felt that they weren't going to get hit by a truck on a dark street. Help the businesses and the entrepreneurs that are trying to make that block a part of the city's culture. Help them out by restoring that parking. It's not just about adding more parking spaces, because sure, that'll help. And that's certainly a complaint that I hear from my tenants as well at 421, that they don't have enough parking. But it's not just about the parking, it's about creating a pedestrian-friendly environment that sends a message to say, you know what, we actually care about Southside. We actually want Southside to look like Northside. We think that you should have the same experience that we have on Main Street, on Northside, of walking around in a friendly environment where you're not going to get hit by random trucks. The removal of parking may have been beneficial to McDonald's. I still have not heard of all the slew of things that we've heard from McDonald's. We haven't really heard a specific impact. I haven't heard how it's actually going to hurt revenue. You're going to increase pedestrian traffic on that block. And increase the pedestrian traffic will also benefit McDonald's. So I'd love to see if we could actually talk about real numbers, but it's more important that council really think about what the future of Southside should look like and what we want our city to be. And I believe we want our city to be a place where entrepreneurs can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
Eddie Rodriguez, 701 Main Street, Bethlehem. I've been a lifelong resident for over 40-something years. A community activist changed my life around, and I see a lot of things because I'm in the community continually, every single day. North side, west side, east side, south side. Mostly on the south side, though I live now on the north side. But I see what happens. I'm in favor of both sides, but it's not going to work. And I'll tell you why it's not going to work. First of all, I respect that McDonald's has a business there, but you know, there's a lot of situations that I haven't heard here that are going to change, though they want that change. That left lane, which I've been talking about before all these people came here, I've been talking about this for ages on end, right here in front of you. And in front of all the audience. And the reason for that is because the businesses do not flourish. Business has decreased. There is an ongoing presence of drug activity which does not allow people safely to walk to their neighborhood. How many times have you heard me talk about this here? But I'm not going to talk about that. That's what's happening at the corner of West 4th and Wyandotte, right there. So I am asking here tonight once more, pleading my case as a community activist that I am, and you know that I am, is to have a continual presence of police in that corner and clean it up. I mean, clean it up. Don't you think it's about time that something is done? That these drug addicts are allowed to do whatever the heck they want on that corner and harm the safety of the people that live in that area or the whole entire city because of the heroin, the crack, especially heroin that happens there. And they openly do it. And that hurts the business there. It hurts the people, the pedestrians. People are not safe in that area. That's what's happening there. Along with other things. Blind spots that are created because of that left turn lane. When you are traveling on 378 south, you have 2 lanes going in the same direction. The blind spot is created simply that if a trucker or a high truck close to a 40-footer or 45-footer is high enough to create that blind spot on the left-hand side, someone making that left turn lane into McDonald's will not see what's on the right-hand lane at all. There's been numerous accidents, numerous, and that's what's not talked about here tonight. There is a safety issue. There's it's prone to more accidents and incidents than anything. Pedestrians are not crossing safely. They're crossing at that drive-in right there also, which is a blind spot because traffic is too fast. On the other hand, it is creating a stop-and-go situation. It's creating congestion. When you're coming down that lane, it's creating a congestion because people behind someone making a left turn lane have to stop until they can be allowed. They can be allowed, I repetitiously say that, to make that left turn lane. And that's a dangerous spot. It's hazardous. We don't see that. The other thing I want to suggest is, if you do decide to eliminate the left turn lane, is to put the parking back on Wyandotte. Have 1 hour meter parking only, enforced by a parking authority, and no double parking. 1 hour parking, no double, absolutely, and with signs. So give these business owners a chance to flourish. The other thing I want to suggest is more of a police presence in that area. Again, it's not just West 4th and Wyandotte, it's that whole strip right there. People are not safe in there on both sides. They're not safe at all. And last but not least, in 19 seconds, the left turn lane, northbound left turn lane, traffic has decreased into making that left turn lane. I've been up and down that street. I just don't see that much of an impact on revenues or anything like that happens with McDonald's. I think that's ridiculous.
Thank
really.
you. Mr. Mayo. Anyone else like to address the City Council after Mr. Mayo?
Good evening. My name is Antonio Samayo. I live at 1135 East 3rd Street in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I want to tell you a little bit of the story. Forgive me if I go into the weeds. I'll come back around.
As long as it's an agenda item.
It is. On July 20th, my father passed away of brain cancer very suddenly. And we had one of his brothers who came here from Portugal, and he had a very limited amount of time that he could actually be here before he had to change his ticket to get. So the funeral had to be organized in a very short amount of time. And as many people know, there's a lot going through your mind when a close family member passes away. And we actually went through Mr. Connell's establishment. They were very good. And you sit down in a very nice room, and they're very cordial to you and caring. But it seems like you're answering 1,000 questions. And you, a lot of the times you don't know how to answer them. And there's always something in the back of your mind, which is, how much is all this going to cost me? My father's stay in the hospital in the ICU of a week and a half cost $250,000. He didn't have insurance. So that burden was constantly in my mom's mind. If there was a $150 charge for police escort and funeral, we would have most likely opted out. The funeral was actually very large. I remember that it took a very long time for people to arrive at Holy Savior, and it surprised me. Before we got to the cemetery, though, we were at Holy Infancy Church on the south side, and I got into my car, into the limousine, with my sister and my mother, and I was about to, as I call it, freak out. And I was trying very hard to be strong for my mother and my sister so they would not also break down, and I could have somebody to kind of lean on. And as I sat there in the limousine with a creeping feeling that I was about to let my mom and my sister down, looked out the limousine window, and there was a Bethlehem police officer, a female, blonde hair, very pretty, helping my family cross, family and friends cross the street. And she saw me, and I was staring at her, and she nodded. That was it, just nodded. And in that split second, I felt better. So when you look at charging a fee for a service that has been given to the residents of the city, I hope that you take my story into consideration, because at the end of the day, it is not just a service, it is also the face of the city. So how do you want the residents of the city to think of the city? As being in debt so much that now you're charging fees for services that you've provided? Or as the city that has compassion and caring for the family of those who are being buried? Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman of brown sweater.
Hi, my name's Tom Budnitz, and my address is 535 East Bedford Street in Salisbury Township. I want to talk briefly about restoring the parking on the 400 block of Wyandotte Street. I am a contractor, I have a business, and I worked at that block about 20 years ago when there was parking on both sides of the street. And there was really no problem with unloading tools and materials, and it was relatively easy. And this fall, I did a fire and water damage project on the block, fire and water damage repair, and now that there's no parking on either side of the street, the closest place to park is the small lot on the corner. And sometimes when I went there, the lot was filled, and one day it was closed for some reason. So sometimes I have to park like a block or block and a half away and carry everything in and out of the building. And I checked into getting a parking permit for the lot and at the parking authority, and they told me there were no more permits available for that lot. And so I have to go down every 2 hours and put more money in the meter. When you used to be able to park on the street there, I usually would get a place, I would say within 1 or 3 parking places of where I was working, and it worked out fine. So I would recommend restoring the parking on the block. I think it would make it more civilized. It would just be, it would be better for every reason I could think of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? We'll move into the agenda. Old business, members of council, old business. We'll move into communications. Communications 7A, City Solicitor, amendment to lease agreement Starters Golf LLC, Golf Course Clubhouse Restaurant.
Attached is a proposed resolution and associated amendment to lease agreement for council's consideration. Please place this matter on the agenda for review and appropriate action.
Comments? The resolution will be added to this evening's agenda. 7B, Special Council Committee, amendments to rules of City Council, elections of the President and Vice President of Council.
A memorandum from the chairwoman of the Special Council Committee. This is regarding proposed amendments to the rules of council recommended by the Special Council Committee. City Council Solicitor has advised that the third-class city code in Pennsylvania Sunshine Law mandate every vote of City Council to be public and recorded by the city clerk. Accordingly, the election of the President and Vice President of Council must be by roll call. The applicable paragraph of the resolution with proposed amendments to the rules of council recommended by the Special Council Committee has been revised per the attached for consideration by the members of council at this evening's meeting.
Comments? Resolution 11E is on the agenda this evening. We'll move to 7C, Director of Budget and Finance to Guaranteed Energy Savings Project. A memo was received from Attorney Spadoni this afternoon advising that City Council does not need to vote on this matter for informational purposes. Mr. Spadoni, any comments?
No.
Thank you. We'll move to reports. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Administrative Order Number 1385, I hereby reappoint Deirdre Sumter, 519 9th Avenue, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, 18018 to the Fine Arts Commission. This appointment is effective through December 2014.
And the resolution to confirm is sponsored by Eric Evans and Gene Polinsky.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Polinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer. Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye. Mr. Mayor, any other reports?
No, Mr. President.
Thank you. We'll move to item 9, ordinances and final passage. Bill 25, adopting the 2012 general fund budget. I asked the clerk to read Bill 25 on final reading.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the general fund budget for 2012, sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
I asked the clerk to read the amendment to Bill 25.
The amendment to Bill 25 reduces various appropriations and general and civic expenses and decreases the general fund budget from $66,725,000 to $65,675,000, sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Any questions? I asked the clerk to call the roll on the amendment.
Mrs. Polinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye. Any other questions, discussion? I ask the clerk to call the roll on Bill 25 as amended.
Mrs. Polinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9B, Bill 26, adopting the 2012 water fund budget. I ask the clerk to read Bill 26 on final reading.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the water fund budget for 2012, sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
I ask the clerk to read the amendment to Bill 26.
The amendment to Bill 26 reduces the appropriations from $19,765,000 to $19,692,750 and is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Questions or comments? I ask the clerk to call the roll on the amendment.
Mrs. Polinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye. Questions or comments? Ask the clerk to call the roll on Bill 26 as amended.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Bill 9C, Bill number 27, adopting the 2012 sewer fund budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the sewer fund budget for 2012, sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9D, Bill 28, adopting the 2012 Golf Course Enterprise Fund budget. I ask the clerk to read Bill 28 on final reading.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the Golf Course Enterprise Fund budget for 2012, sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
I ask the clerk to read the amendment to Bill 28.
The amendment to Bill 28 reduces the appropriations from $1,572,000 to $1,569,500 and is sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments, questions? Ask the clerk to call the roll on the amendment.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye. Questions or comments? I ask the clerk to call the roll on Bill 28 as amended.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9E, Bill 29, adopting the 2012 Liquid Fuels Fund budget. Bill 29.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the Liquid Fuels Fund budget for 2012, sponsored by J. William Reynolds and Eric Evans.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9F, Bill number 30, adopting the 2012 capital budget for non-utilities. I ask the clerk to read Bill 30 on final reading.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 2012 capital budget for non-utilities, sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
I ask the clerk to read the amendment to Bill 30.
The amendment to Bill 30, Section 2, the following appropriations are added. Fire apparatus replacement plan, EMS and firehouse renovations, and 911 console upgrade. In Section 3, the following source of revenue is added. Dedicated tax in the amount of $2,135,000. The non-utility capital budget is increased from $8,605,047 to $10,740,047. The amendment is sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Questions, comments? Ask the clerk to call the roll on the amendment, please.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye. Questions, comments? Ask the clerk to call the roll on Bill 30 as amended.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
6-1 passes.
9G, Bill 31, adopting the 2012 capital budget for water utilities.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 2012 capital budget for water utilities, sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye. 9H, Bill 32, adopting the 2012 capital budget for sewer utilities.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 2012 capital budget for sewer utilities, sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Blansky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9I, Bill 33, adopting the 2012 Community Development Budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the Community Development Budget for 2012, sponsored by Eric Evans and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Blansky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9J, Bill 34, adopting the 2012 911 Fund Budget.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, adopting the 911 fund budget for 2012, sponsored by Eric Evans and Gordon Mallard.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Blansky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
Nine K, Bill 35, fixing the 2012 tax rate for all city purposes.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, fixing the tax rate for all city purposes for the year 2012 at 14.85 mils, sponsored by Eric Evans and Gordon Mauer.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Blansky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Nay.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9L, Bill 36, Firemen's Pension Fund compliance with the Pension Funding Equity Act of 2004, Pension Protection Act of 2006, and final regulations issued under the IRS Code, Section 415.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending Article 151 of the codified ordinances entitled Fireman's Pension Fund in order to comply with the Pension Funding Equity Act of 2004, Pension Protection Act of 2006, and the final regulations issued under the Internal Revenue Code, Section 415, effective as provided in the amendment. Bill number 36 is sponsored by David DeGiacinto and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Blansky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9M, Bill 37, Police Pension Fund compliance with the Pension Funding Equity Act of 2004, Pension Protection Act of 2006, final regulations issued under the IRS Code, Section 415, and Heroes Earnings Assistance and Relief Tax Act of 2008.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending Article 153 of the codified ordinances entitled Police Pension Fund in order to comply with the Pension Funding Equity Act of 2004, the Pension Protection Act of 2006, the final regulations issued under the Internal Revenue Code, Section 415, and the Heroes Earnings Assistance and Relief Tax Act of 2008, effective as provided in the amendment. Bill number 37 is sponsored by David DeGiacinto and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Blansky.
Aye.
Mr. DeGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9N, Bill 38, Officers and Employees Retirement and Pension System compliance with the Pension Fund Equity Act of 2004, the Pension Protection Act of 2006, and final regulations issued under the IRS Code, Section 415.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending Article 155 of the codified ordinances entitled Officers and Employees Retirement and Pension System in order to comply with the Pension Funding Equity Act of 2004, the Pension Protection Act of 2006, and the final regulations issued under Internal Revenue Code Section 415, effective as provided in the amendment. Bill number 38 is sponsored by David DiGiacinto and J. William Reynolds.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Aye. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
Aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Donches.
Aye.
7-0 passes.
9O, Bill 39, amending Section 521 funeral procession fees.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending Article 521 of the Codified Ordinances entitled Operation of Vehicles, sponsored by David DiGiacinto and Gordon Mauer.
Comments?
I have a question.
Go right ahead, Ms. Dolan.
We're on 9O, amending Article 521 funeral procession fees.
Correct.
But based on the city clerk's reading, we also have, under resolutions, establishing funeral processions fees.
Under resolutions, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Spadoni, that will be the fee, the dollar amount. 11A will be the specific dollar amount.
And 9O is simply establishing that there will be fees.
Correct.
Okay. Does that make a comment?
Yes?
I want to respond. This is just to so many people a very sensitive issue. They see the having a police escort as being a sign of respect from the city, also a display of its compassion and its caring. And they say, how can you take something like that away, something that is from our perspective, very tangible. Police officers not available to do other work, but instead waiting, doing funeral processions. And to us, it's very tangible, those of us sitting up here, but to someone who's seeing it as symbolic of the city's compassion and caring, to them it's not tangible. It's very emotional, it's spiritual, it's symbolic.